Oh, there's the recording. So some of that was out of our control, but we are aware about it and apologise actually as much as we, in terms of the parts that were in our control. And what we're going to be doing is particularly encouraging questions from women when we have that opportunity later. So Ian, I think you're going to say some of the technical stuff.
Yeah, yes, thanks so many of you coming. We've got quite a few questions that have been sent in advance, and Hashi, our chair, has note of those. So they will be, some of them will be given priority, but you can ask questions during the course of the evening. There is a Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, and if you use that, then you will be able to ask a question there, and it won't actually be public but will be seen by people here. There is also a chat button which might be under, depending on the size of your screen, might be under more, 3 dots and more. So you can use that to make a sort of public statement if you want to everybody. But of course, all these statements need to be must be very polite and friendly. So we're going to have a very good very good a very good debate anyway. So one of the first things we're going to do is a poll for people to vote, but I'm going to hand back to Elaine now, and she's just going to say a little bit more about Brent Friends of the Earth. Okay, thank you, Ian.
Well, we're a long-standing local environment organisation. We've been around for 16 years, apparently, and we're affiliated to Friends of the Earth nationally. So we're basically a bunch of volunteers working together to raise awareness locally about the environment, particularly at the moment about the work that we all, and especially the government and the council, need to do to reduce the impact of climate change. We've been advocating strong council action, and we're very pleased Brent has declared a climate emergency and developed a climate emergency strategy and an environment network. Our aim is obviously for yet more ambitious action and for progress to be monitored and reported back. We continue to support the long-standing campaign by Divest Brent for the council to divest its pension fund from fossil fuels. So I'm just going to say a little bit about some of the activities over the last 6 months. We were really happy to be finally out and about in September and October last year, raising awareness and collecting messages for COP26 through some lively bunting making stalls. We've done a huge variety of other things in the last 6 months, from running a poster campaign for a poster competition for local school children to holding a nature and flood walk. We've recently persuaded the local garden centre to promote peat-free compost more prominently. And our aims for this year include reducing plastic use in the borough. And we have a project we're exploring biodegradable bags that local shops could be encouraged to use, as well as more public access to drinking water, to discourage the use of plastic water bottles, obviously. So we're also planning to make sure people are well informed about the energy crisis, including the profits made by oil and gas companies and the timeliness of ending reliance on gas by insulating homes and moving to cleaner heat. So we'd love you to join us. We meet monthly, we're friendly, open for new ideas. We have different interests and knowledge and good links with other groups, including the Parks Forum, Brent Pure Energy, which is putting solar panels on schools, Brent XR, and other organisations. Definitely need more help over the next period. So we'll put up a link in the chat, and I hope you'll think about joining us. So finally, I'm going to hand over to Hashi Mohamed. Hashi is a local barrister, writer and broadcaster. He grew up in Brent and understands local issues. He's kindly agreed to chair the hustings, and I'm sure he'll probe and challenge all our candidates in a very fair and impartial way. So Hashi, over to you.
Thank you very much for that kind introduction, Elaine, and thank you to Ian also for organizing this. It's a great pleasure of mine to be doing this. This is the second time I'm doing this. We will have a very, hopefully a good discussion, a very civil discussion. I'm encouraging all the speakers to engage with each other, to question each other, to challenge each other, because this is a democracy. And that will hopefully assist in all of you understanding what's going on. We had over 70 people sign up, and we now have almost 40 people listening and watching at the moment. Now, Ian, have we abandoned the poll that we were planning on doing before the session, or should we start thinking about doing that now? So let me then say what this poll is about. This poll is a sort of non-scientific finger in the air of where people are right now, and then we'll do a similar poll at the end to kind of check where people have moved and whether or not their minds have been changed. I'm going to try and keep to the time as strongly as I can, and we have the couple of hours allocated. Hopefully we will be able to use most of that, and please don't hesitate to also put questions in the chat function so that I can pick them up as part of the discussion much later on. Now, briefly introduce the candidates and the people who are speaking. From the Conservative Party, we have Sunita Hirani, who is the candidate for the Kenton ward. Welcome, Sunita. We also have Councillor Muhammed Butt, Labour, who will be known to many of you as the leader of the Brent Council at the moment. We also have David Stevens, Green Party, candidate for the Welsh Harp ward. And we also have Councillor Anton Georgiou, the Liberal Democrat, currently representing the Alperton ward. And so I should, say basic declaring of interest. I met Anton at the last hustings, and I've known Councillor Butt for a very long time. He lived on the street of my mother when I was growing up as a very young boy, before even he became a councillor. So look at him now. So on that note, let's start the poll, and we can take it from there. You can see on your screens now. The poll says, how do you intend to vote on the local council elections on May 5th, 2022? Please pick your choices now.
Okay, I take it, I'm going to take it that people have voted now. So I will, let's just see, right. I will end the poll, and this is you should be seeing the result in front of you. So do you want to?
I'm just waiting to see. I'm unable to see has it been declared? Hang on, I might maybe missing it from my screen. I saw that the poll was there. Can everyone else see the result? I can't see it.
Oh, wait a minute. No, right, here we are.
There we go. So we can see now the results show a 29% intention to vote Green, 21% Liberal Democrat, and 15% Conservative, and 35% Labour. So at the moment, Labour is ahead of the Green Party by a few percentage points, and the Liberal Democrats are just behind them, and the Conservative at 15%. So let's see, we have 9% that haven't voted. So there is a 9% to play for. And of course, last time I should also tell you that the intention to vote at the beginning dramatically changed at the end. So people do change their minds. They are open-minded. So please keep that in mind as you try and convince them. It's all to play for. Right, on that note, the opening statements now. Each candidate will have 4 minutes to say their opening speech, to be able to convince you all about where they stand. and we will time them, and in order to ensure that it's fair. Just for all those of you who are watching, we had a way of picking the speaker's order via a virtual straw poll, straw hat, if you want to call it that, and Sunita came out on top. So we have Sunita who will go first, and Sunita, over to you. You have 4 minutes, which I think Ian is also going to time.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. My name is Sunita Hirani. I'm a former Met Police officer. I worked for the Met Police for about 15 years, and I was based in Kentish Town. I was the only Asian female officer on my team. Unfortunately, I experienced bullying within the Metropolitan Police, and I took them to court, and I won an employment tribunal case against the Met. So I challenged them on the bullying and racial discrimination that I incurred in my service. I also, I'm a local resident in Kenton. I was born and bred in Kenton. I attended all the local high school, like Claremont High School, Kingsbury High School, and I know the area very well. I'm very passionate about biodiversity. I created a biodiversity project 18 months ago, nearby where I live, on a public footpath which runs from Brookfield Crescent to Falcon Way. I raised funding for about approximately £18,000. With that £18,000, I developed this biodiversity project, which was opened by the Mayor of Brent. We had 200 guests attend the event. It was very successful. I managed to also raise £1,000 funding from local supermarkets within the borough. And unfortunately, where the project is, we're based by the Willstone Brook, which is heavily polluted. I'm currently in discussions with Thames Water and Environmental Agency to get this brook cleared, because we have misconnections from residents' properties, and we have foul sewage going into the brook. So that is my mission, to get that brook cleared. It's heavily polluted. We don't have any living objects in that brook, unfortunately. So that will be my project this year. Also creating a green corridor in Kenton for every green space, creating wild meadows, creating more biodiversity in the area. I'm associated with the Friends of Woodcote Park and Brent Parks. I work closely with them. And I recently trained to become a Tai Chi instructor to teach Tai Chi to local residents in Brent and offer my services for free. I don't use my car. I walk everywhere. I try not to, I try to be healthy. I try to walk everywhere and use public transport. And I'll be running for a new candidate to be part of the Conservative Party if I get elected. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that introduction, and for keeping to time, Sunita. Very interesting opening remarks there. Councillor Mohammed Butt, Labour, is our second speaker. Councillor Butt, over to you for your 4 minutes, please.
Hashi, thank you very much for that. And I also want to say thank you to Brent Friends of the Earth for organising the hustings, and a warm welcome to all the panelists today as well. For me, I think I'm going to try to stick to the questions we were asked, right? So the first one of those is in relation to accelerating the retrofitting across the borough, right? What we've done, we're speaking to ministers and to make sure, right, that we've made the case to them to make sure, right, that any funding that is out there, we can apply for, and also we're making sure, right, that people are aware of our carbon offset fund and our sustainability funds that enable people to actually start looking at the opportunities around retrofitting their homes, or even sort of looking to add sort of solar panels, new boilers and everything else to their homes, right? That enables them to actually access some of the issues and problems we're facing around sort of things like fuel poverty, because we know some of the challenges we're facing with the cost of living crisis, especially around the energy price increases. Only a few days ago, I just received an email from EDF, right, saying my bills were going up from £120 a month to £300 a month, right? So and that's one of the things that is going to be challenging for a lot of our residents, and hence why we've introduced things like the Resident Support Fund, right, that enables people to tap into support funds that will help support them in their lives and actually tackle some of the issues. Green jobs and powering up the economy. It's one of the powering up the economy is one of the strands that we have in our manifesto. Right, if people want to take a look at the whole manifesto, you can go to brentlabour.co.uk and read about everything that we've pledged in there. We've invested about £44 million in Moorland Gardens. That's going to be a centre of excellence, right, in giving people the opportunities to upskill themselves, right, give them qualifications, education, and also help support them into some of the new technologies and jobs that are out there as part of the green economy. And we're also looking to make sure that the work we're doing in Park Roll and the Old Dog Park Roll Development Corporation is going to tap into the opportunities in creating those opportunities, not just for residents, but also to create tech sectors and opportunities for business that actually to be part and parcel of the conversation as we go forward. We're also taking a look at how do we sort of work with our residents and educate people about the benefits of actually walking, cycling, and using other sustainable methods of transport, and making sure that people are trying to tap into the resources at the local high street level. I think we do need to take a look at how we can actually reduce the number of vehicles we have on our streets and our roads, and just make sure we're contributing to the better air quality and reduce the emissions. I think one of the other things that I just need to sort of add is around the divestment that we've been talking about, and we've had plenty of conversations, and there is a commitment from Brent to divest ourselves by 2030, but we are now also talking to the London Civ. We're having conversations with them to reduce and to match our targets as well.
Thank you, time. Thank you very much. Now to the Liberal Democrat candidate, Councillor Anton Georgiou, currently representing the Alperton ward. Over to you, Anton.
Thanks very much, Hashi. So, hello, my name's Anton. I'm the Liberal Democrat councillor for Alperton, but first and foremost, I'm an environmentalist who's deeply worried about the future of our planet. There can be no denying that the climate crisis we face is the biggest challenge that we've ever had to combat. In a post-pandemic world, we need to refocus our energies and prioritise the well-being and health of our planet, because if we don't, the consequences will be catastrophic for the human race and for other species that we share Earth with. Whilst most of the work needs to be done by nation states and multinational corporations, there's a lot more that can be done at a local level here in Brent that tragically I do not believe is being done right now. We'll hear a lot tonight about the work being done by Brent Labour. However, with local elections on the horizon, I think it's really important that residents in the borough are given a transparent assessment of the shortcomings of this administration. The reality is very different from what gets posted on the council's Twitter feed, as we all know. Declaring a climate emergency, as this council did in late 2019, is only one step. Our planet requires more than just words, which sadly is what we get from Brent Labour. As one of the few opposition councillors in Brent, I've had an up-close view of this administration's mishaps over the past 2 years. I've also witnessed their complete lack of drive in seeking to address the climate emergency. The words are great. However, Brent Labour continue to pursue policies that are having a detrimental impact on the environment. We really do have to question their priorities and ambitions. One clear example is Labour's addiction to approving ever higher tower blocks in our borough. As the ward councillor for Alperton, my residents have borne the brunt of this illogical and dangerous decision-making, but I know I also speak on behalf of others in Kilburn, Wembley and elsewhere who are fearful about what high-rise actually means. Leaving aside my personal detest of leasehold shared ownership, I want to specifically address the impact these monster towers have on our environment. A UCL report, which was published by the GLA's Planning and Regeneration Committee last year and sent to all local councillors in London, even those in Brent, made several points about how bad these buildings are for the environment. So on the one hand, Brent Labour are declaring a climate emergency, and on the other hand, allowing developers to build buildings that are highly energy inefficient and over their lifetime adversely contribute to carbon emissions. I'm sure we'll cover this, but it's also important to note that the Brent Plan, effectively the guide the council takes on planning matters in the borough, has many examples in it of destruction of limited open and green space we have in the borough. Infill development will have a huge impact on existing green space. I know that Friends of the Earth have published a green deprivation map, which points to locations in Brent as being amongst the most deprived. If this council was serious about preserving and promoting such space, why is it seeking to destroy it? When we have a wider discussion about active travel, I'll go into more detail about Lib Dem ambitions and what we would seek to do more of. I think there can be no doubt that active travel infrastructure in Brent has been lacking for many, many years. I know the leader prides himself on being a cycling champion, and I'd like to ask where exactly in the borough he or any of us would feel safe to use our bikes. Comparing Brent to neighbouring London boroughs like Camden and Westminster, it's clear that we are a long way behind. This could be in part down to the population and limited people within the borough that would actually use roads in this way. But our view as Liberal Democrats is that it's the responsibility of the local authority to encourage and promote active travel, whether that be cycling or walking. The council can do so much more to engage and communicate with communities across the borough, which is something I can 100% get behind as per one of the pledges that you sent us. In essence, I do not believe enough is being done to tackle the issues we care deeply about. The world is at a precipice, and if we continue to drag our feet and talk big but act small, we should all fear the consequences. The Liberal Democrats are standing candidates across Brent in May and want to keep doing our job of holding Labour to account and making them act with greater urgency on environmental issues. We need to see loud voices within the council and chamber continue calling for the rapid acceleration of retrofits.
That's your time, Anton.
Thank you.
That's your time. Thank you very much. And we'll no doubt pick up a lot of those points, and Councillor Butt will no doubt also have an opportunity to respond to that later on. To our final opening statement this evening from David Stevens, the Green Party candidate for Welsh Harp Ward. Over to you, David.
Thank you, Hashi. Good evening, everyone. I'm standing for the Greens on the basis that they are the only party that can be trusted on the environment. The other parties will say they support the environment, then do exactly the opposite. Specifically, in Labour's case, they have approved planning applications which have seen the destruction of green spaces. One of those right next to one of the most highly polluted roads in London. A green space which helped absorb noxious vehicle emissions. And this has been done with little or no consultation with my fellow residents. Now, previously, as a resident, I have enjoyed a great relationship with my local Labour councillors. We have collaborated on community projects and campaigned together. I've even painted Dawn Butler's office free of charge. But in the past, I've also been content to put my cross in the box at elections and think that I've been doing my bit for the community. However, it has become apparent to me that this isn't enough, especially in a borough where your vote is taken for granted and where there's virtually no opposition and therefore no democracy. I have lived in Brent all my life, and I know its people and places. I've travelled all across all the globe, but this is the one place that I definitely call home. But I'm seeing my home being eroded, mismanaged, and mainly for the benefit of developers, with no thought given to local services like hospitals, schools, and transport provisions. Time, as Councillor Georgiou was saying, is running out for the environment. But we must rise above party politics. We must collaborate. We must think about wider issues. Our air quality is worsening. Our green transport provision in the borough is woeful. And once our green spaces are gone, they're gone forever. What do I do locally? Why do I deserve to be a potential candidate? Well, as I said in the past, I've worked very closely with my local Labour councillors, such as litter picking, clean-ups and other issues like organising anti-fly typing, anti-tie picking signs. I'm the one that's badgering the council and the waste enforcement team about fly tips and then reporting back to my neighbours. I now work with the Friends of Welsh Harp, where we've been litter picking and again sign making. I'm a member of the Phoenix Kayak Club based in the Welsh Harp, which has not only worked with Friends of Welsh Harp, but is also passionate about Welsh Harp conservation. And I would just like to say, finally, I'd just like to thank, well done and congratulations to Sunita for the work at Falcon Way. I've cycled through there a lot and I'm finally very happy to have met someone who's responsible for that amazing piece of work. Thank you for that. I also like to thank Anton for his opening statement, of which I wholeheartedly agree. Thank you.
Thank you very much to all of you for that very clear and thought-provoking ideas about where things are. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to each and every single one of you, and I will be asking you different questions. Some of it may be overlapping, and I've got a lot of questions that have been sent to me by Simon Erskine on behalf of Brent Friends of the Earth, clustering a number of questions that have come in, and I will be taking them as I go along throughout. Please try and keep your answers to the questions relatively brief. Obviously, take every time that you need to answer the question, but I'll try and get as many questions as I possibly can. Councillor Butt, I think it's only fair to begin, but given that you are the incumbent leader of the council, thank you for being here, and you naturally have the unenviable task of having to deal with many attacks this evening, no doubt. But I will give you the opportunity to respond to what Councillor Georgiou has said in just a moment. But the three things that I wanted to pick up with you are very straightforward. One is that a lot of the questions that we get is, and it's something that David picked up on, as the incumbent and as the overwhelming voting people here have Labour councillors, there is a sense that votes are taken for granted, that Labour has the power and they're not working for it. And I think that comes through on a number of the issues that I've been reading about, whether it's about the trees, whether it's about the parks, whether it's about the towers, all of these issues. So can you just address that? And what evidence can you give us that you are not taking people's votes for granted, given how many councillors you have and how little opposition there exists, with no offence to Councillor Georgiou in particular? Over to you, Councillor Butt.
Actually, thank you very much for that. And I think I would refute the suggestion that we take anything for granted, right? And the commitments that we made in our previous manifesto, right? We've made sure, right, that we've delivered on them, right? When it comes to sort of taking a look at the environment, planting trees, 4,500 trees have been planted, right? We've created 22 wildflower meadows, right, to help towards that sustainability, and also the bee corridors that we've created, right? So that's just the start of the work that we've done, and the commitment is that we're looking to double the number of trees that we're planting, right? And some of the comments about the developments that are coming forward, right? Every single one of those developments, right, is contributing, right, to helping to support people, right, to get into good quality, secure accommodation that people need, right? If I talk about the people who are on our housing list, who are living in temporary accommodation, right, we need to make sure, right, we're absolutely providing that support, that help, and giving them the helping hand that people need, right? In our parks, if you take a look at what we've done, we've created the outdoor gyms. We've created play spaces for young people and to utilize all those spaces, and we're continuing to work with our young people in our schools, espousing the benefits of recycling, reuse, and is making sure, regardless of what age you are, giving people the opportunity, right, to be part of the conversations when it comes to the environment, the sustainability, and also when it comes to taking a look at how we can encourage more people to use local shops, right? Because that's to reduce, right? The people having to rely upon their cars, the investments we're making in our town centres, right, to make sure the businesses have the opportunities to survive and thrive, right, and making sure that people understand that how the local economy is absolutely vital, and hence why we've introduced things like the Buy Brent app, right, letting people know, right, about what is around them in their local area, and just making sure, right, the local area, right, it becomes, right, the first and foremost element in their lives, right, rather than having to travel further afield, having to use cars, right, and expending all that energy.
What about the specific question about the tower blocks that Councillor Georgiou asked you and their environmental impacts? We know that all of the developments around Wembley Park in particular, for example, is not exactly the average Brent dweller who's renting those. But what about the impact on the environment that Councillor Georgiou picked up on that?
Once again, what we have done in relation to when we have any conversations with any developers, right, is making sure, right, that the environment and the sustainability, right, is first and foremost in those conversations, right, and also, right, it goes back to the point I was making about sort of giving people the opportunity, right, to have a secure, safe accommodation and a roof over their heads, right. We've also created, it's not just about creating homes and flats, it's about creating communities as well, and also giving the opportunity for some of our key workers, our nurses, our doctors, and GPs and everybody else, right, the social workers, our teachers, right, the opportunity, right, to have affordable accommodation, right. If we're talking about Wembley just alone, right, we've got key worker blocks in there, right. I was chatting to a teacher who was working in one of our primary schools. She was expending a lot of her income, right, on private rental sector, right, and with the efforts that we've made in order to make the affordable accommodation, right, she's now only paying £900 a month, right? That's something the council has done, right? Giving her the opportunity, one, to have a roof overhead, give her her family a bright future, two, right, three, right, okay. And have the opportunity, right, to have that her employment in the place where she lives, and be able to provide that education to young people as well.
Okay, well,
hope and ambition.
We can come back to that, and Councillor Georgiou will no doubt have some comments on that. To Sunita, Sunita, you talked about your environmental credentials. One of the common themes that's come up on the questions that I've read from people is probably captured by a question that's asked by Suzanne Morpurgo, where she says, will the candidates commit to ensuring that Parks Department and staff take a greater priority within the council, either through the funding streams or within the budget? So one of the key things is about budgets, which are being squeezed, which are not effectively being prioritized. So can you just tell us about what your commitment would be if you were to be elected, and what role would you play in ensuring that these budgets are healthy and that they're used for the right purpose in terms of making our environment a lot more sustainable?
So I've experienced it firsthand on the project that I was working on the Brookway Biodiversity Project. We identified a piece of land. Brent Council wouldn't admit it was their land. They neglected it for 35 years. They told us to take it upon ourselves as local residents to redesign and look after the area. They said they had no money to put into the area. So therefore, I raised the funding myself. I got my hands dirty. I dug out all the drug canisters, all the saws, all the needles, everything that was on that patch. I dug it out with some volunteers. So I know what it's like. You know, for Brent Park to say they don't have the funding, I'd like to see where the money goes. I'd like to actually see the sums, and I'd like to make sure there's an allocation of appropriate funds for all green spaces within the borough. The borough is being neglected, especially, you know, the parks. I've seen it myself. My local park, Woodcock Park, it's been neglected. There's no public toilets, there's no cafe. We're actually fighting to have a new cafe put in, especially public toilets. So I would look at the funding, and I'd look at the sums, and I'd like to know where the money's been spent, and I'd make sure that there's a big proportion of it allocated to green spaces, especially after we've been through COVID and people rely on green spaces for their mental well-being and their personal well-being. So that would be a hot topic for me.
Thank you, David. Just in terms of picking those points up about budgets, but also about trees. A lot of the comments that have come in have been about we need more trees planted in the borough. They're cut down sometimes during the construction with no real directive for them to be replaced. They talked about to be watered for, they of course must be watered for a couple of years, but the advantages of them outweigh any time or expense. One of the things I know from my street is often trees get planted, but they're not looked after. People don't water them enough, things don't happen enough, and then they end up dying. So just your comments on that, because at the end of the day, everything we're talking about here needs money, and budgets are where things are being squeezed. And I think Sunita's just given us a good example of how she's experienced that. Just your thoughts on that.
Yes, so let's talk about an example which actually prompted me to stand as a candidate, which is the green down by Neasden Lane, which has just been completely destroyed. When we met with the Labour councillors to protest and say, why is this being done? One of the reasons they said they were going to do it is because the trees weren't mature. But they've been there 40 years, and they were absorbing an awful lot of carbon dioxide. So for all the talk we've heard today about planting trees, is the panel aware that for every mature tree you cut down, you have to plant 7 new ones to make up the loss of this one mature tree? And appreciate that funding is tight. And like Sunita said, I would like to see where the money goes, because I don't believe that when we are destroying a green space unnecessarily, that we are actually going to replace what we've lost. And this is what I meant in my opening statement. We are losing our green spaces faster than we can replace them. And also picking up with Sunita's experience in Woodcock Park, I'm seeing exactly the same thing with Welsh Harp. I'm telling you now, Welsh Harp would be a complete state if it wasn't for the volunteers, the wonderful friends of Welsh Harp, because they go there on a regular basis, they're litter picking, they're picking up the needles, they're picking up everything else, what Sunita was saying, which is why I winced when she said it, because I know exactly what she means. And basically, as I said, it would be a complete state if it weren't for the fact we had these volunteers. The council is completely reliant on volunteers. They're prepared to put our lives literally in danger by the fact that we're having to pick up dangerous items. But there's no actual support. It all has to be done at the community level. It's just not right. Yet we've got money to spend, £17 million on a set of steps coming down Wembley Park. So I really would, one of the first things I'll do is I want to scrutinise, and I actually mean that, scrutinise the budget, see where the money goes, because we have to have a serious reallocation of our priorities. Thank you.
Councillor Georgiou, you will no doubt respond to some of the points that Ms. Councillor Butt has explained there, but I'd want you to really highlight to people who are speaking today concrete things that you can do or have done as examples to deal with these points. And we know when we talk about the environment, we talked about the ULEZ example last time we were speaking, but let's talk about the trees, let's talk about the fly tipping, let's talk about the way in which some of these things are not happening. But crucially, I think for me, what I'd be really keen to understand is if it is a vote for a candidate who isn't Labour, a vote that can work in circumstances where we know that you have to still function within an administration that is a significant majority. So I know that you're going to say a great deal about why Labour's not doing much or not doing enough, but can I get you to really focus on what you think you can do in that context, please?
Yeah, that's fine. Well, the short answer to your question that you directed at Councillor Butt, do Labour take votes for granted and the people of Brent for granted? The answer is yes, they do. And we see that every single day in the examples that have already been given by the 2 other panelists. In terms of what I've specifically done as the ward councillor for Alperton, as you'll know, I'm the only Liberal Democrat on the council at the moment. And what I've done is attend every single planning committee and ask these pertinent questions about the impact that tower blocks in Alperton and other parts of Brent are really having on the environment. I addressed full council a number of times in my time as councillor so far, and in each time I do address full council, I come up with I go back to the chamber and I talk on behalf of residents who are sick and tired of all this development that's going on, that's having such a negative impact on residents. And you know, the Labour Party simply aren't listening to the residents of Brent, and also, as I said in my opening remarks, to both declare a climate emergency, but at the same time be doing things that are having a detrimental impact on the environment, you know, is deeply worrying, and it sort of shows their priorities here. So as councillor, I've attended every planning committee. I've objected to all of these planning applications because I know that in addition to the environmental impact of these tower blocks, there are lots of other detrimental impacts that these tower blocks have on local residents in Alperton and elsewhere. Councillor Butt talks about trees. Trees are really important, and I know that in December of 2020, I believe, the council committed to map out where trees existed within the borough in order for us to be able to really assess how many trees are being destroyed in the process of development. That's yet to happen, and I think that that probably speaks to the Labour Council's refusal to be held accountable to some of their actions. David talks about the need to scrutinise budgets and see where these priorities are. As a councillor, I know that it's really difficult in the opposition to actually effectively scrutinise the Labour administration because they don't like questions being asked, and when you do ask those questions, they don't answer them clearly and directly in the way that they should do. You know, volunteers as well. David speaks about volunteers and the need to rely on volunteers to do some of the work that Sunita, David, myself are doing in our respective wards. The background that I have on my screen now is the Grand Union Canal in Alperton, which is an amazing asset for local residents in Alperton, but also the wider Wembley area. When I was elected councillor for Alperton, the canal towpath was a complete disgrace. That despite millions of pounds being poured into the area in terms of development and you know, propping up these luxury tower blocks in the area. So I do think that it's really important to know that volunteers should not be doing all of this. It's something that the council should be prioritised, and it's something the council should definitely be looking at investing more money in and budget too. And when they say there isn't money to do that, you know, as Sunita said, I think it's really important to look at those books and see how much money this council is hoarding in terms of reserves, both from developers and elsewhere. All this money needs to be spent on tackling these critical issues. And the environment is that top issue that this borough needs to be focusing on, as every other borough in this country needs to be focusing on. And I just don't believe that the Labour Party is doing enough. So a vote for any other party in this election is not a vote for a wasted vote, and it's not a vote that we'll take for granted. It's a vote for people, and I speak as a Liberal Democrat, for people who will be community champions and hold this Labour administration to account. The only way that democracy works is when there is accountability in opposition, and there needs to be much more of it in Brent.
Thank you. Councillor Butt, you'll no doubt respond to those points as well. The two bits that I want to highlight here that again keeps coming back to this is, are you able to enlighten us about where the budgets are? Are you able to enlighten us about how much money is being spent on the trees, on the environment, on these aspects that people are talking about, so that the audience is listening has a lot more confidence about how that is happening? And then the other thing that keeps coming back in the questions that were being asked is the losing of green spaces to development. That is something that has come up a lot in the questions that we've been getting. Again, could you give people an idea of what that process looks like and how that is being addressed? So address what Councillor Georgiou is talking about, enlighten us on where the budget is coming and going, and the loss of green spaces to development, the scarce green spaces to development, please.
Hashi, thank you very much for that. And I think you sort of alluded to some of the things about the budget, right? About how the budgets have been squeezed, right? If I just give you a quick indication, since 2010 up until today, £185 million has been taken out from Brent Council. In the last 4 years alone, from 2018, £77.5 million has been taken out from the council. Since 2010, right?
When you say taken out by whom?
But by the government. Our funding that is given to us in order to provide, in order for us to be able to provide those services, right? That's a scale, the challenge and the cuts that we have faced. And just to give you one last stat before I come to the question about the budget, right? In 2010, if you go back to when we had the full budgets at that time, right, we had just over 4,000 members of staff that were employed, right? Because of the cuts that we've endured and had to take on, right? The number of staff that we now employ is down to just over about 1,800 members of staff, right? To provide this probably even more services with increased demand, with more complex needs, right? And I have to say, when people talk about where is the money being spent, I think on Councillor Georgiou, you were there on the 24th of February. We had the council's full council meeting where the budget was presented to the council, right, and to all the members, right, including every single piece of information as to where the money is being spent. Every appendices, right, was presented, right, for full and open scrutiny. And just to go back a little bit, right, even our auditors have been through the council's accounts and qualified, right, that we have actually provided value for money, right, in the way that we have used the money and provided those services, right? So for anyone to say that they don't have access to any of those data or information sets that are there, 24th of February, you can go onto the council's website. It's the most open and transparent budget that we've made and we've given to the people of Brent. When it comes to open spaces and green spaces, right?
Before you move on to that, can I just press you on something there?
Go for it.
So we know that budgets have been squeezed.
Yeah.
We know that the government there's been cuts. But what's really difficult to understand about these kind of answers, Councillor Butt, and I hear it all the time, is that you then have to make decisions about where you spend your money, right? Yeah. And then if you talk to the anti-social behavior department, they say budgets are squeezed, budgets are squeezed. You talk to another wing of government, they say budgets are squeezed, budgets are squeezed. So who's getting all this money that you do actually have in the end, and who decides where that money goes? Yeah. So for example, the SIL money that's coming in all the time from this development, who's deciding actually now we need to prioritize this or the other? Because budgets are being squeezed, but you're still having to make those choices. So the question is, when are you making those choices for the environment?
Obviously, Rishi Sunak and the government are the ones who actually make the decisions about as to how much money is allocated towards Brent or any other council. Okay, right. And if you take a look at what's happened in London, a lot of money, right, has been taken out of London and it's been transferred to councils outside of London, right? So if you go to the shires, what you'll find is, right, the power spending, the spending power that the government keeps on talking about. Right, we've been disproportionately impacted in relation to how much money actually comes in relation to the population we have, in relation to the complex needs of the people we have as well, and also the growth in population as well. I mean, just people do have children, people get married and everything else, or have partners and everything else, and they choose to move into Brent. So all those people move in, and then when it comes to the point about SIL and neighbourhood SIL, okay, that guidance and legislation, right, is set by central government, and we've as to how much money we can actually take and procure from each of those developments, right? And we have our SIL guidance, right, which then speaks to each of the developers and says these are the priorities that we need to be focused on. Right? So obviously we need to have the infrastructure in place. So schools, doctors, GP surgeries, investment to tackle some of the things that people are just talking about, sort of the green open spaces. If you go into Wembley, right, there's a 7 acre green open space, right, with a children's play space. Right, we've just had conversations, right, to use some of the neighbourhood SIL money, right, to create GP practices, one in Wembley, one in Alperton, one in Kilburn, right, and then to take a look at the population increase in young people. Right, we've made in almost £100 million investment in our primary schools. We've made a £60 million investment in our secondary schools. And if you take a look at the outcomes, because of all that investment, 95% of our schools are now rated good or outstanding by Ofsted. Right, but that's because we've been able to utilise the funding and the money that's come from that regeneration. And that's reinvested back into our communities and to create those open spaces and to invest in our children and their futures.
Okay, so just I'll get a quick round of points from Sunita and the rest of the councillors and contributors before I move on to the next bit. Sunita, just in terms of just thinking about what we've just been discussing, budgets, cuts, priorities, and so on, what are you going to do as a candidate that isn't being done right now, would you say, in terms of how you might respond to these challenges?
I personally feel that the money is not being accounted for, that it's not being scrutinised enough. I haven't seen breakdowns of costs. I don't know where the money goes. I'd like to actually see a full account of how much we get in, how much is going out, how much is being allocated where. I think it's highly unfair that children, have no toilets in a public park such as Woodcock Park. They're having to use a primary school. They're having to go and have to ask a primary school to be let in to use toilets. It's just I don't feel that there's enough money being pumped into green spaces. I've opposed 3 developments in the last year where they want to build tower blocks besides the Willstone Brook. It's not possible, but still they're pushing to build 3 or 4 story high tower blocks right next to Willstone Brook. You open your front door and you could literally fall into the brook. I don't understand the logic behind the planning department and what Labour are doing in terms of pushing new builds. So yeah, I would challenge every single development, especially if it's not been looked into thoroughly, like this one on Lidding Road.
Okay, Councillor Georgiou, I'm going to come to you just so the audience knows. After this round of answers, I'm going to open it up to people to ask questions. So please do prepare yourselves. And as I said before, try and keep the questions relatively brief. And if you could direct the person that you want to address the question, that's even better. And I will get the candidates to be relatively brief as well. Councillor Georgiou.
So I have 2 specific points to make in response to Councillor Butt, because I think 2 of the things that he said is a bit dubious. So the first point about me attending the budget setting meeting in February, of course I was there as a local councillor, and of course local councillors are provided with a stack of paperwork about this big to look through, and yes, the information should be there, and if we were to look for it, it would be there. However, how do we get to a point where those papers are produced? We get to a point where those papers are produced when Labour councillors decide what's in the budget and what the priorities are. So when, for example, an independent scrutiny committee sets up a task force which is meant to independently scrutinise the budget process, and then there are pushbacks from senior council officers and Labour councillors about the sorts of questions that are being asked, that sort of raises questions in my mind, and I'm sure in other people's minds, about what exactly the priorities are and how those priorities are made. So that's the first point. The second point I would make relates specifically to strategic still. And if Councillor Butt, could help us to understand how much currently exists in the strategic still pot. In my view, strategic still could be not better spent than on the environment. Nothing is better for the long-term future of our borough than dealing with the environmental challenges that we face, and that money should be spent straight away on dealing and combating the climate emergency. So there was money to spend on, for example, Olympic Way from the strategic still pot, 17 point something million pounds on steps outside Wembley Stadium. So why isn't there money now where we need it to deal with some of these pressing matters that we're all clearly very concerned about?
David, in terms of just the budgets, your understanding of it, how you might have approached it differently, what your priorities would be, how you might push for the priorities that the Green Party would like, could you give some thoughts to what is being asked here?
Yes, I've already mentioned scrutiny as my the other councillors, Sunita and Anton. I would also like to ask about where we can make cuts. For instance, we've got the Brent magazine that costs £20,000 per edition to produce. Yeah, not just me, but all my local residents I've spoken to, when I've gone out and spoken to them about standing as a candidate, they've all said, what is that all about? It's a load of rubbish, we don't want it, it's coming in our doors. I would challenge the council, if they want to start saving money, to look at things like that, go out to the public and say, do you still want to receive this? And if they don't, there's £20,000 per edition. How many, if there's 5 editions a year, that's £100,000 that could be saved. And coming back to the SIL that's just been mentioned, we just get some figures? How much is actually left unspent from the SIL right now? Are we able to have those figures? Are they for public knowledge, or are they available to councillors? Because that would be, we would need to know what we've got to work with. First thing's got to be a scrutiny, know what you've got to work with. And as I said, all the way from the beginning, let's start reassessing and realigning our priorities.
For those of you asking in the comments page, when will the candidates address themselves to the pledges? I promise you I will get to that. And now is an opportunity for those of you who want to ask questions directly to the candidates, then please raise your hand and I will come to you. And we have currently gone up in our the number of candidates that we have, sorry, the number of attendees to 48. So it's getting more and more exciting. Now, I'm going to resist taking the first question, which is from Suresh, because he's a candidate, but I won't necessarily bar you from doing so. I'm just going to pause for a moment and try and get members of the public generally to ask questions first, if I may. Are there members of the public who are in the audience who wish to ask a question in relation to this? Please let yourselves know now, and I will come to you individually. So we have Peter Moore. Peter Moore, can you first please just identify yourself as who you are and who your question is to, please? And please remember my specific request to keep your questions relatively brief. Thank you. Peter.
Thank you very much. My name is Peter Moore, resident in Queen's Park. My question, I'm afraid, is for all the candidates. I think we've not heard enough in this discussion about climate change. Given the global importance of mitigating climate change, how big should Brent's contribution be relative to tackling local pollution and green space issues that we've been talking about?
Thank you. Should we start with Councillor Butt? Briefly, you want to respond to that?
I'm just trying to, apologies. For myself, right, the climate emergency, right, is one of the single biggest challenges we are facing, right? If I go back to the budget, okay, we are talking about spending an extra £1 million a year, right? That will go towards, right, to tackling some of the challenges that we are facing. We're also talking about sort of the almost £1 billion that we will be needing in order to retrofit some of our homes that the council owns, to do that. And it is going to be a challenge, right? And trying to put a figure on it, how much we should be spending. It's going to be one of those open-ended figures, because if we go across the whole of the country, we're never going to be able to have enough money in unless, right, we have a collective responsibility, right? Starting at central government, regional, local government, and I think we also need to take a look at working with our partners and colleagues in Europe as well, in order to make sure, right, that we do have those serious conversations, because unless we all work together, right? I mean, I can talk about, like I said, about the £1 million a year that we have put in the budget in our that was just agreed on the 24th of February, right? But that's just a start. We also have a £700 million capital program, right? That's going to be used to make sure that, you know, that the challenges we face, right? The issues that Hashi, you're just talking about, sort of the developments, right? And about how do we make sure that those developments are sustainable, right? We've just spent £44 million trying to do the Mall and Gardens, which is going to be completely sustainable. So, I mean, I can give you figures, but I could not give you a figure that we should be spending, because that's going to change on a day-to-day basis on exactly what we need to do, how we need to do it, and how quickly we want to do it as well.
Okay. Any of the other candidates wants to respond to that? David?
Yeah, so could you do me a favour, actually? Could you put up the FoE's pledges back up?
It's on the comments page, but I can read them out for you. One is the accelerate the rapid escalation of the retrofitting. Second, rapidly create green jobs needed to bring down emissions. 3, ensure most journeys in the borough are taken by walking, cycling, and public transport. I'm summarizing them.
Yeah.
4, protect the existing green spaces and create new nature-rich areas. 5, engage local communities, especially the most vulnerable to climate change impacts. And 6, divest Brent Pension Fund with fossil fuel investments and achieve net zero carbon intensity, but for the fund by 2025.
Yeah, superb. I completely support all of those. And I think if we were to do those in the borough, those are easily achievable things that we can do. Was what you would phrase, the horrible phrase, low-hanging fruit. We could do a lot of that. And we could, as I said, lead by example. And because people and other boroughs aren't going to do something unless they see someone taking the lead. This is our opportunity to say, we found easy ways to do this, so can you. And together, as I've been saying about collaboration, we can all start making a difference. One small change here then has a greater impact further down the line. And the second thing I would say in answer to that question, and here's a novelty, why don't we talk to our residents? Why don't we ask what they want, how much they want us to contribute? I'm talking to my residents all the time about issues around here. They're giving me feedback, and they would love to be able to go out and say to council, we want our green spaces protected. We want to see more stuff done in the parks. So how about we have a grown-up conversation with our residents, find out how much they want to contribute, what they can do either physically or financially, and get that ball rolling. And as I said right at the beginning, let's also leave an example by doing at least or some of those brilliant Friends of the Earth pledges.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Georgiou?
So I think that a lot more needs to be done. I'm not going to be able to give a figure, and I don't think it would be fair to give a figure because, you know, we don't know exactly the scale of the task ahead of us. This is just going to get worse. This is a catastrophe is waiting to happen. We've just been through probably the most difficult 2 years of our lifetime in terms of the pandemic. Everything coming in terms of the climate crisis will be much worse and will cost much more. So we need to have a council, we need to have councillors on the council who will prioritise these issues and continue to prioritise them, not just at election time, not just once every 4 years when the Friends of the Earth organise these hustings, but every single day of the next 4 years. Because if in 4 years' time we're still discussing these issues, I fear it's too late. And I just do not believe that this Labour Council has taken these issues seriously enough. And the talk is great, but the action on the ground, as we all know as Brent residents, as a lifelong Brent resident, I know that the talk is great, but the action on the ground is very, very minimal. I wholeheartedly agree with David as well. I think that bringing residents on this journey with us is going to be so important. Getting buy-in from Brent residents on these issues, making sure we all individually contribute to helping the climate and helping tackle the climate emergency. We all can play a part. I mean, simple things like, for example, educating residents about the need to potentially go vegan or vegetarian, cutting back on our plastic waste, talking to our local businesses who continue to give out plastic bags on the Ealing Road, in Wembley High Road, in Willesden Green. You know, these are simple things that if the council was serious about, it doesn't actually cost that much money. It's about taking the initiative and actually going out there and doing it. So you're going to hear all the talk from the leader and from the Labour Party over the next couple of weeks about how many millions they're doing here and how many millions are going there. But ultimately, some of it doesn't even cost money. It's just about common sense, engaging with our residents and collectively all making an individual difference.
Great, thank you. Sunita, any comment on that?
Yeah, I agree with David and Anton. It's all about networking, liaising with all the friends groups, speaking to local residents groups, speaking to neighbours. You know, we have to reduce our carbon footprint. There's no ifs, there's no buts. It needs to be done, and it needs to be done pronto. The fact that our pavings are asbestos, I can't even say the word. You know, we have no drainage. We have flooding in the area. We have Thames water on our road, probably 15 times a month because there's a blockage. We need to stop people from, you know, doing concrete driveways. We need to have wild meadows. We need to encourage biodiversity. I don't know what Labour's doing, but they're not doing enough, to be honest.
Peter, I'm going to give you just a quick chance to respond to the responses before I move on to the next question. Were you satisfied with the answers? Was there anything else you would have liked to have heard? That's back to the person who asked the question. Oh, he's disappeared. Never mind. We'll move on to Keith Anderson. Keith Anderson, can you unmute yourself, please? Keith Anderson.
Okay, I've just unmuted myself. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Fine, thank you very much. I'd like to pick up on two topics that have come up already. One is green space, and one is collaboration. Both of these things are things where the council has got proud policies, but I'm the chair of the Kilburn Village Residents Association down in the bottom corner of the borough, and our territory includes the Kilburn Square housing estate. They've already built one infill block on it, and they now want to build 5 more. And we've been discussing this with the council for a year. Last summer, they had a huge pushback from the community and the residents and the neighbours, and they agreed to make some changes. So far, they've made a change that responds to one of the 3 main objections, which is the height of a tower. But they're now still wanting to build 2 new blocks on green space where there are mature trees. And how can that be consistent with the climate emergency strategy? The other thing is that when the agreement was made that there would be a rethink, the statement was it would be done in collaboration with residents. But the nature of the engagement process that was brought forward has not been collaborative. The quality of that engagement has been just as bad as the low traffic neighbourhood consultation has been. So only 10% of the residents have supported the scheme that will take away the green space and the trees. I'd like to know how that's justified by Councillor Butt.
I will let Councillor Butt answer that specific question, and then I want to hear from. We did mention at the beginning that we have a very male-heavy panel, so if there are women who could wish to ask questions, please do come forward. Councillor Butt, do you want to just answer that point very quickly, and then we'll move on to the next question?
Keith, we have had the conversations with yourselves and the Kilburn Square residents. We have made concessions, right? And you know, I think that there will always be times, right, where we may not agree on things, right? But we still need to take a look at what we need to do in order to provide the services, the homes, and the spaces that people actually need, right? And we are making that commitment, right, to have the conversations with yourself. We haven't backed away from the conversations. We're still talking to you. We're still talking to the residents. We're still getting all the emails coming in. Councillor Southwood and Councillor Tatler are working with the officers, right, in order to make sure that we get the best outcomes. We also need to work with our colleagues in the GLA in order to make sure that we're getting the funding and the support from them, and we're also having to work with our colleagues across the road in Camden as well, right? So because it's quite a complex situation that we find ourselves there, right? And we're working and continuing the conversations in order to get the best outcomes for everyone.
Keith, any brief response to that?
Yes, the residents and the neighbours here totally accept that there is a huge need for new housing, and we're not NIMBYs, we're not saying no new housing, but the council has said they want a scheme that balances the need for housing with the interests of the local community and particularly the residents. And the current scheme is only 20% smaller than the original one, takes away green space. We're in one of the worst categories of green space in Brent from the FoE data, and the housing targets alone should not justify taking away that green space in these trees.
Thank you.
Hashi, can I just quickly come back on that? I mean, Keith, look, right, one of the biggest needs down there, right, as you know, right, is the need for larger homes, right, for 3-bedroom, 4-bedroom properties, right, and that's one of the concessions we're also making, right, because we do need to make sure that we're providing the homes and the spaces that people actually need as well, right. Look, I'm not going to deny it. We have people living in poor quality accommodation. That's temporary accommodation, right? And you know, I have people writing into me all the time, right? And how can I say to people who are living in that poor quality accommodation, right, that we're not going to be building the homes and the spaces that they need? The pandemic, right, was one of the things, right, that has sort of highlighted some of the disparities that we have and face in our society, right, where people weren't able to have the spaces, right, that they needed to be able to work from home, to be homeschooled, educated, right, and all these kind of things, right, and that's where we're starting from first, right, and Keith, I've said to you, we haven't pulled away from you guys, have we? Okay. We're still talking to you, still engaging, we're still interacting.
Okay, thank you very much, Keith and Councillor Button. I've got a question from, sorry, Councillor Georgiou, did you want to say something on this?
Yeah, I would like to. Hi, Keith. I think that the monologue that we've just heard from the leader of the council about the need for housing, you know, none of us on this panel and indeed in this meeting will deny the fact that there are people who need housing in our borough. There are lots of people who I speak to on an almost daily basis who are waiting for housing, single mothers, people who are working long night shifts, you know, people who are really struggling. Do I believe that this Labour Council is prioritising those people when they make decisions about the developments that are going up in Alperton and elsewhere in the borough? No, I do not. Because ultimately, only a very small percentage of these new builds are affordable. Only a very small percentage are for local people. And the vast, vast, vast majority are for investors and help the developers who are making a buck in our borough. So what I would say in response to Keith's question about Kilburn Square and about exactly what's going on down there, he's absolutely right to point that out, that the Friends of the Earth map, which talks about open spaces, shows that that particular part of Brent is one of the most deprived. You can't, Councillor Butt, talk about the need to provide housing, but at the same time take away some of the only open space that local people have access to. No one wants to be living on the 20th floor of a tower block without having any access to green space. It is detrimental both to physical and, importantly, mental health. And coupled with that, the environmental impact of these buildings. You have to look at this report. You have to look at the studies which show that these buildings are bad for the environment. They are not energy efficient, and they have, over their lifetime, they contribute negatively towards carbon emissions. I think that you can't be serious about the climate emergency and pursue these sorts of policies.
Thank you, Councillor Georgiou. Agnes Pazer has got her hand up. Could I get you to either unmute yourself and or turn on your camera for your question, please? Agnes.
Sorry, it took a bit of time to unmute myself.
Okay.
Basically, I've got a question that is very much on the same line. We hear all the time the same debate. We need more housing for people who need housing. And the leaders just said we need to provide quality accommodation. Well, the leaders should tell us, how will this accommodation provide any quality? The kids on Kilburn Square will have nowhere to go and play football. The people, the existing residents, will have nowhere to go and walk their dog. So don't pretend that adding 60% of population in Kilburn Square is going to provide quality accommodation, because it's not.
Okay, thank you for that, Agnes. I'm very keen not to turn this into a question and answer session for Councillor Butt, but I will get Sunita and David to respond as well to these points. But can you just address that very specific point about Kilburn Square? The loss of the green space will mean that the people who are living there aren't getting the open space they once had, and the people who are going to live in the buildings that you're building are not going to have the green spaces to be able to enjoy. So it's a bit of a lose-lose is what the question is really here, Councillor Butt.
Do you want to, oh, okay.
Yes, please.
Okay, sorry, apologies.
Take that, take the opportunity to respond, because I don't want people to be saying things that you have a right to respond to without, but then at the same time, I don't want to turn it into a question time for Councillor Butt.
Okay, thank you very much. Look, if you take a look at what's happening in Kilburn, South Kilburn, and everything, take a look at how much open space we have down there, and we are creating even more open spaces, right? Take a look at Wembley, take a look at Alperton, right? There's so much open space and community spaces that are being created, right? And every building does have community spaces, communal spaces, and everything is being provided in relation to what people need. I'm not saying that it's going to be the be all and the end all. Absolutely not. This is the start of the conversation, start of the journey, and start the conversation that we need to have in order to make sure we are delivering. Right, we are a borough that is absolutely landlocked, right, by 6 other councils. Right, we're not the same as any other sort of outer London borough, right, who may have a lot more open spaces. If you can go into Bromley, Bexley, see how much open spaces they have, right? But take a look at the funding that they receive. Right? We are one of the boroughs that has been squeezed the most, right? And is not receiving its fair share when it comes to funding, right? And as I pointed out, £185 million has been taken out by this Tory government, right? Impacting on councils like Brent, and impacting on its residents, impacting on our ability to provide those services, right? And yes, right, we are going to be challenged in the way we do things, right? But it should not absolutely get in the way of trying to provide those services, and the spaces and the homes, right, and the school places that our residents need, and giving them the opportunity, right, to have the ability to start their own businesses, to open their businesses with workspaces and everything else. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to create an even level playing field for every single one of our residents, because we need to create the foundations which are strong, that enable people then to have those conversations and to move forward.
Thank you. Sunita, any comments on what you're hearing?
I just want to know what the rationale is, the rationale for building these new homes on green spaces. Why does it have to be built on a green space? Why can't you build it somewhere else? Why can't you allow the children to play, have reasonable, facilities to play, and for people to walk their dogs? Where is the biodiversity in this? Where is reducing carbon footprint? I don't understand why there is a massive need to build on green spaces and take that away.
David.
Well, as I said earlier, as someone who's prompted to stand for local election based on the destruction of a green space that was very dear to me, Councillor Butt's words would carry more weight if we were building social housing, but we're not. We're building these high-rise flats, which cost an awful lot of money, and they're mainly for investors, as Anton said earlier. You go around Wembley Park, on an evening, most of the lights are off. No one's living there. They're not contributing to our local budget. They're not contributing to the community. And when we talk about affordable housing, come on, let's talk about what the myth of that really is. Who can really afford? I don't know of any teachers, nurses, and local area that can actually afford affordable housing. So who are they really being built for? If it was genuine social housing, I would be a bit more supportive. I'd also like to ask Councillor Butt, he just said earlier there, London Borough Brent isn't receiving its fair share of budget. Why not? And what is the council doing about that to make sure it receives its fair share? Why are other boroughs receiving their fair share and we're not?
Okay, we'll come back to that. Hold that thought, Councillor Butt. We've got a question from another lady called Glynis. Glynis, can you turn on your camera and or your microphone, please, to ask a question?
Hello, can you hear me?
We can.
You can't see me, can you?
No, not yet.
Probably just as well. Hold on.
It's all right, we can hear you, so I'm sure the quality of your question will not be hampered by whether or not you can see.
Okay, thank you. Yes, I just wanted to comment on some of the comments of Councillor Butt, who seems to be blaming central government for a lot, and also comparing Brent to outer London boroughs. To me, what he's saying really looks like he's living in cloud cuckoo land. He's not creating open green spaces in Brent. Everybody knows he's not creating open green spaces in Brent. He's building on them. He's talking about strong foundations. What strong foundations is Councillor Butt building? He's talked about schools, but he's closed down all the youth clubs in Brent since he's been in power. And children need places to play. There's nowhere for children to play anymore. They've all been closed down by Councillor Butt and his cronies. So, you know, don't get me started on flats for foreign investors either. We all know that the flats that you're building are not affordable for local people. So all these things you're saying, I'm sorry, most residents like myself just think it's absolute, well, I won't use the word, but...
Thank you, Glynis. I think we got your point. You don't need those words.
Yeah.
I need to give Councillor Butt a right of reply here because there's two. Councillor Georgiou, I could come to you and all you're going to tell me is Councillor Butt is this not doing this, that, and the other. Let me give him an opportunity. That's just two. There's two people who've challenged him. I will come straight back to you, Councillor Georgiou. Councillor Butt, do you want to just respond very quickly, please?
People are entitled to have their views, absolutely fine and dandy, right? But what I will say is, right.
But those are not just views, though. You've just been challenged on the fact that the youth clubs, the affordability, these are not just views. Those are points.
I'm coming to it, right? Right. The thing is, right. If you go and people are saying, right, I'm blaming central government for the cuts. Well, I am blaming the central government for the cuts, right? They're the ones who have taken the money away from Brent. They're the ones that have taken the money away from every single one of my residents in Brent. They're the ones who are creating the crisis we're seeing, right, in relation to the energy. We're seeing the impact of their cuts, what they've made, right, to universal credit, taking away some of the biggest supports that we had in place, right, to support those residents. Yes, I will blame the government. I'm not going to shy away from blaming the government, and it goes back to 2010 when the Lib Dems were in coalition with the Tories. Right? Who was it who cut all that funding to Brent and to all those councils in Brent? Yes, I am going to make the comparisons with other councils because the Brent Council has been disproportionately impacted because we have had more money taken away, right, from us and our residents because of the cuts that have been forced upon us. Right?
Okay.
People are talking about what we haven't done. 4,500 trees have been planted. 22 meadows have been planted. We got bee corridors. We got electric charging points are going up across the borough. Right? 21,000 lights.
We've heard that.
Have been changed. Right. So the climate emergency and the future of our children and all our residents is first and foremost in everything I do in Brent.
Thank you. Councillor Georgiou.
Thank you very much. So just to counteract a couple of points, because I do take issue with Councillor Butt's assertion that more green space has been created in Alperton. That's absolutely not true. I'm the councillor for Alperton. I'm there almost every day, and I know that no new green space exists in Alperton. In fact, the only way that green space is being invested in Alperton is when residents apply for NSIL money that then gets spent in, for example, Alperton Sports Ground. That's one of the things that I was very keen to support from residents when the NSIL round was being decided on last year. So no new green spaces in Alperton. Let's just tackle the central government attack line from Councillor Butt. 12 years after the Labour Party got into power in Brent, they're still talking about 2010. And absolutely, budgets have been cut. And Councillor Butt and his Labour colleagues won't also admit and attest to the fact that when the 2010 election was fought, those cuts were being pursued by the Labour Party too. So let's not pretend that this is a Lib Dem or Tory thing. At the time of the 2010 election, all the major parties were pursuing austerity as a way of getting out of a financial crisis. And Councillor Butt knows that, but the Labour Party will happily let you forget that the Labour Party supported those cuts. The other thing that I would say about the money that exists in Brent is £17 million in recovery money that Councillor Butt and Councillor Seth and other cabinet members are able to pose for pictures with, for pothole filling, bins here in new parks. This is all money that they have had from central government that they're able to use in the run up to an election to promote themselves on social media, in the Brent magazine, etc., etc. So let's just really assess what's happening here in Brent at the moment. You've got a Labour council who will talk about all these issues over and over again. You've just heard from Councillor Butt. He's doing everything he can do to support every single resident. These are big swathing comments that mean nothing to people on the ground, particularly not to people in Alperton who are sick and tired of this Labour administration not listening to them and not taking their issues seriously enough.
Okay, thank you.
No, I haven't quite finished. The climate emergency is an emergency, and until and unless this council does more, it will get worse. So I think we need to keep going back to that, because that's what this debate is about. Don't let Councillor Butt pull the wool over everyone's eyes about cuts this and cuts that. He has been in power for 12 years, people.
Thank you very much, Councillor Georgiou. Elaine, I've seen you put your hand up as one of the conveners of today. You're either going to tell me off or you're going to say something else. You're on mute. You're on mute.
Yeah, all right. Yeah. Now I want to ask a question.
Yes.
If that's all right.
Of course.
So this is for all the candidates. If you are in power, thinking about the climate emergency as something terrifying, but also an opportunity to transform things, how would you promote the things that you're going to do around clean air, safer streets, green jobs, and other things you might do? How are you going to bring people with you and promote what you're doing in a way that actually kind of moves the debate so that we're all, as people have said, working together?
That's a very good question. I'll start with Sunita. We haven't heard from for a bit. Sunita is bringing people together, working for cleaner air, safer streets, and greener jobs.
So again, networking, talking to all the friends groups, all the local residents groups, talking to your neighbours, basically getting everybody's opinions on board. If trying to get funding for solar panels, creating more jobs for people, the local people in the area, just getting everybody involved in biodiversity, again, protecting green spaces, helping volunteers getting involved with planting and getting funding for that. So I'd encourage a lot more community support and reducing our carbon footprint.
David, your response to that: cleaner air, safer streets, greener jobs.
Thank you, Hashi. Well, for a start, I would use as a template the FoE's pledges that have been put up today. That is a very good starting point, and I would use that as a basis. I would also very much want to engage and listen to my residents about that progress. And judging by the comments and the questions that I've heard tonight, I think that's a very sound route to go down, because this is not just my view, it's their views as well. And the other thing I'd like to encourage, which I don't see a lot of until I came onto this panel today, is collaboration. We all live in the same environment. We should all equally protect it. So there's things that we can do. I would happily support Sunita with her work in Woodcote Park, with the great work's being done there. Councillor Georgiou, with the things that he's doing in Alperton. It's you know, I see in politics, oh, he's in a different party. You must not praise what they're doing because it's wrong. It's you're not being faithful to your party. Well, that's rubbish. What's the most important thing is the environment. And no matter what political colour we are, we should be working together for the one thing that we all need to live, which is the environment. So just to recap, follow the FoE's pledge, engage more with residents to make sure they understand and they are supportive, which sounds like it's not going to be a big issue. And let's have some more cross-party collaboration. Let's not be afraid to work together, for God's sakes.
Thank you very much for that very good challenge. Councillor Butt.
I think when it comes to taking a look at sort of the green air and everything else around the sustainability and environment, we joined the Brent Environmental Network, right? And that's a collection of individuals from across the borough that have come together to help work with the council, right? So that we can actually come up with ideas, solutions, and to actually make Brent and the environment something that we can all be proud of and actually leave a legacy for all our young people, and just continuing around that, right? I mean, the solar panels people are talking about, right? We have the Solar Together sort of initiative that we've launched in Brent and across other London councils as well. We have the carbon offset fund, which has enabled people to tap into solar panels, and also to take a look at air source and ground source pumps and everything else that enable people to have those opportunities. We're working with our schools and businesses to give them those ideas as well. When it comes to sort of safer streets, we're working with the Borough Commander, Sarah Leach, right? We've been able to bring in 50 new police officers, right, into Brent, right, that can target some of the hotspots that then frees up some of the other police officers to go around into all the other localities that may have an issue, and when it comes to green jobs, as I said earlier in my introduction, we're working with the likes of Moreland Gardens, where we're creating a centre of excellence. We're working with the OPDC, and we're creating the opportunities for those new green jobs, and creating a tech sector that will be part of the Alperton Development Corporation that will bring the opportunities for Brent.
Thank you. Elaine, any response to that, or shall I move on to the sort of final stages of our event?
Yeah, I suppose I'm just looking for new thinking really about around engagement. But I think, I think the council has been trying to do some things, and I think it's about raising the profile of climate as part of that community, the new kind of different kind of community that we want.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to go to Suresh Consagra, who's been waiting for patiently. I should caveat his question by making clear that he's a Conservative candidate, and so he is entitled to ask a question. Just because he's a Conservative candidate doesn't mean he's not allowed to ask a question. But I just thought I'd put that out there so that people are aware the context in which he asks his question. Suresh.
Thank you, Hashi. Okay, just one. Yeah.
Take your time. And you can turn on your camera if you wish, Suresh. I'd like to see the painting behind you. Oh, you're somewhere else now. Put your mic on. There you go. There you go.
Thank you. My question to Muhammed is one that I've raised it a number of times. He says what he's been doing in Brent, protecting the environment. Now, in Brent, residents will be aware that our pavements, which are either slabs or bricks, being removed and being asphalted. Now, more than 10 residents associations have actually objected to this with scientific evidence to show that it is not environmentally friendly. Water doesn't permeate into the ground. It is one of the causes that causes flooding in the area. And also, I think it is more costly, and a carbon imprint is much higher than replacing paving slabs or bricks.
Thank you.
But Muhammad Bhat just doesn't listen, and he says listens to people. 10 more residents association with scientific evidence. So, Muhammad, can you please tell me when are you going to listen to the residents?
I will come to Councillor Bhat. I will go to Councillor Georgiou first, but this is something that I have a bee in my bonnet about, by the way, Councillor Bhat. So I will add my venom to this of the asphalting of our pavements as something that I have a problem with. But Councillor Georgiou, any comments on that? Thank you, Suresh, for the question.
Thank you.
Absolutely. So I think the Conservative group proposed an amendment, a motion, sorry, at a full council meeting a number of, I think it was last year. And I was happy to support the motion in principle because I believe that the council should be listening to over 10 residents associations. I think they call themselves BRAP, who are against the council's policy on asphalt paving. Now, as Councillor Consagra has alluded to already, asphalt paving is really bad for the environment, but also the work that goes into replacing existing pavement slabs, getting rid of them, bringing them out of the borough, destroying them out of the borough, all has a huge impact on the environment and hugely contributes towards carbon emissions and our carbon footprint. I think that the council, again, on this issue, have not listened. They think they know best. And this is something that I will go back to what I said earlier. I do not believe that this council take the views of residents seriously. I do think they take residents for granted. And on this specific issue, it took 10 residents associations from across the borough. This isn't just one part of Brent. You know, I know that Wakara, so the Residents Association in Wembley Central and Alperton also joined. So this is a cross-borough call for the council to rethink this whole thing. And again, they haven't listened. Councillor Consagra is right. This has a huge impact on the environment. And as many as 80% of the slabs that they're currently getting rid of are perfect. So there's really no need to be doing what they're doing. And I also take issue to the amount of money and the amount of time has been spent on doing Wembley High Road, which was almost okay to just have remedial work done to it. But of course, using the recovery funds to do the Wembley High Road and then pose for pictures on it is a much better use of Councillor Butt's.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Councillor Butt, would you like to respond to that?
Okay, Suresh.
I have a problem with the council removing the pavement slabs. I have to tell you, that's the one contribution I'm going to make to this today.
I totally understand and appreciate that as well. I appreciate the honesty as well. Okay, Suresh, you know the situation, right? That we find ourselves in, right? You were part of the previous administration as well, right? From 2006 and 10 and everything else, right? When you guys failed to make any decisions, right? But I'll leave that alone. Okay, when it comes to the money that we receive, right? We receive funding, right, from the GLA in order to help facilitate, right? So some of the works that we need to do across the borough. So if I go back to 2010, we used to receive approximately £16 million of money, and then the GLA used to work with us in order to fund some of the works that we needed to do, right? And in today's time, we receive no more than about £3.5 million a year. Right, so if you compare to that, compared to £16 million we used to receive to £3.5 million, we need to make sure that we utilise the money as efficiently and most effectively as we can. I totally understand the concerns that people have around paving slabs or asphalt. Right, we can talk all day long about whether which is more environmentally friendly or helpful, right? But we've taken a look, right, and the work that and how it's laid and everything else, right, we can absolutely demonstrate, right, that one, that there is a financial benefit that for us as a council, right, in laying asphalt across the borough, and if we have a financial benefit, that means we can use that financial benefit to actually, right, resurface even more streets across the borough, right, and asphalt is a lot easier for us to maintain, to update, to repair, even if utility companies come along and dig up afterwards, right, it is much more easier for us to actually replace and to repair that, and what I would say is the money that we used to receive from the GLA and TfL and everybody is all to do with the funding. TfL is not receiving the money that you actually need to receive from the government as well. TfL is continuously having to rely upon government bailouts, and that has meant, right, the money that then comes over to councils has been reduced.
But Councillor Butt, let me just get you on this. Councillor Georgiou and Suresh just pointed out to you that there is cross-borough support and cross-borough objection to this issue.
Yeah.
If that is not enough to make you think, actually, let me find another way, then what will be? I just don't understand that. I get what you're saying, that it might be a bit cheaper and asphalt is easier, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
But actually, if you're having such widespread kind of pushback on this, surely this is something where you think, actually, do you know what? I need to think about this and let me find another way of dealing with this.
For all the people that you're talking about, there are just as many people saying to us, "Thank you very much, Councillor Butt." I say thank you very much. Absolutely.
There are people. You're saying there are people who are welcoming asphalt.
I will take you onto Chippenham Avenue. I will take you onto Chalfont Avenue, right? I will take you to Grove Way, Parkview, right? I will take you onto all those streets, right? Let's knock on the doors there, right? You know those streets, right?
Yeah, I know those streets.
Yeah. Right, and I will take you into those streets, right? You knock on my door, right, without telling me when you want to go there, right? And I will take you. We'll knock on those doors, and you will hear from those residents, right, saying, "Thank you very much, Councillor, for doing those pavements." Look, the situation we find ourselves in, right? So some of our roads and pavements have not been done for 20, 30, 40 years. Okay, that's technically, right, the lifespan, right, that each road should have, right? Considering the investment that we make into each of those roads. I don't want to go back onto each of those roads, right, every couple of years, right, but replacing paving slabs. One of the worst things about the paving slabs is when people drive over them. Okay, right, and regardless of how many times we go out there and say to people, please don't drive on the pavements, right? Don't park on the pavements, right? People still do that. But when people come to your homes to deliver things, what do, right? If they're struggling for space, instead of just parking 30 meters up the road, they'll mount the curb, mount the pavements, and break it. Right? The amount of money that we have to spend, right, going back to replacing individual slabs and bits and pieces, honestly, absolutely horrendous costs. Right?
Okay.
It's costing us more. It takes more resources, more effort, more costs that are involved, right?
But it completely changes the makeup of how we see our roads and how we see our streets.
Yeah.
The way in which we walk on those pavements makes a difference in how we experience our built environment. And I say that as a planning lawyer. And if you put asphalt everywhere, then it really changes fundamentally how we appreciate our environment. I'm going to move on from this question. I'm going to give Suresh, very briefly, and then I'm going to move on.
Very quickly. I think Muhammad Butt is actually today admitted that it is all about money. What we are talking about today is protecting the environment. And I'm asking Muhammad, how much money has he got in the reserve funds? 15 million pounds. How much has he got in the other reserve fund? 440 million pounds. And the money that we're getting in the sale, that money is to improve the environment. And don't tell me that it can't be used there. I think it's our money, it's taxpayers' money, it's ratepayers' money, and we can figure out ways to spending money. Don't ring fence it. Spend it on the right
Hashi?
Yeah.
Very quickly, I'm
Very
going to take two questions from Nick and Simon.
This is Suresh keeps on talking about finances and using reserves, right? And this is where the financial illiteracy, right, comes into it. I'm not going to hide away from that, Suresh. How many times have we explained to you, right? You can only use reserves once, right? So in the following year, right, you will have to make up, right, the money that you've just used, right, from the reserves. Right, so I will have to use that, and then I have to find.
Muhammad, I don't need to listen that. I've heard this before.
I did give you the courtesy of
I don't need to listen to that.
Okay,
I gave you the courtesy. I did give you the courtesy.
Let him finish, and then we'll move on.
Okay.
We'll move on.
And the point I'm making is you can only use reserves once. Okay, and if I use any reserves now, okay, right, I will have to. In the following year, because I have not got the money in the reserves now, right? You can speak to our auditors who will confirm to you, right, that the money I've just used in our reserves, I will have to backfill straight away. I will have to make, right, the requisite cuts, right, in those services, right, in order to backfill that. Then I have to find another 3-4 million pounds in order to he's just doubled the cuts.
It's about choices. Okay, correct. Two final questions before we final statements. Can I get Nick and Simon to get ready to ask a question? Nick, who you've got your hand up, please turn on your camera if you can or not, and please ask your question. Thank you. Nick, are you with us? Okay, we'll come back to Nick. Simon Stanmore Common. Simon, please, could you ask your question, Simon?
Okay, right. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay, right. A question. Well, it's kind of a different one, but I'll be very brief. It's how do you see your if you're elected? How would you go forward and use planning control to protect green spaces besides waterways, and protect against flood risk, and improve water quality? Part of the issue I see is that council officers in drainage change, and there's not enough support for them. But how do you see what resources do you think you need to commit to solve this issue?
Okay, thank you. We'll go straight to Sunita, who we haven't heard from for a bit. Sunita, your response to that, please.
So working along with environmental agency and working with specialists to check the waterways, to see the condition they're in, to see if they're polluted, to see if there's anything living in there. And again, like I said, protecting the waterways, making it clear, working with local ecologists, and bringing everyone on board to protect the waterways.
Thank you. David.
How would I apply planning rules? Rigidly. I certainly would not allow any further development on green spaces that ends up lining the pockets of developers, especially for investors. Just wouldn't allow it. There is a need for social housing, absolutely, but I'd have to look, or I'd like to see there be other alternatives, like other brown spaces, like could we repurpose other buildings to save the carbon emissions and waste? So there'd have to be a wholesale re-evaluation of how we do that. And if there's issues with building on floodplains, etc., again, pretty much, if I'm in charge, it's not going to happen, quite simply.
Thank you very much, David. Councillor Georgiou.
Well, I think as Liberal Democrats, we would do everything we can to protect and promote our open green spaces. And in terms of flooding and any impact of development, we'd want to see comprehensive studies conducted by experts. I think that the council can only do so much, officers can only do so much. I think there needs to be comprehensive studies undertaken on every single planning application to fully assess and fully understand the impact that each application has on the environment. And that needs to be made available to the decision makers, the planning committee who make these decisions at the council. I think that, and another point that I would make about the election and how important it is to get other voices in the council who aren't going to just toe the Labour Party line. We need to see other parties. I'd like to see many more Liberal Democrats with me elected next time to actually start fighting for the things that residents care about and the things that we've spoken about today, particularly in relation to planning.
Thank you. Councillor Butt, your comment on that briefly, please.
I think first and foremost, it starts with the planning regulations, right? If you take a look at what's been happening, right, with the planning regulations, right, over the last 6, 7, 8 years, right, this government has actually weakened all planning regulations and made it easier for developers and everybody else, right, to be able to do whatever they really want, right, and hence why the things like our local plan and our development management policies are absolutely key and crucial, right? And we need to hear from residents when we do the consultation around those as well. The other thing for myself, right, is that we've now instigated regular meetings with the likes of Affinity Water, Thames Water, the Environment Agency, and we have those conversations with developers, right?
Okay.
It is about making sure, right, that they understand the impact of what their developments are going to do, and if their developments are going to have a negative impact, right, it's made absolutely crystal clear to them about that.
Thank you very much. Nick, you've appeared. Do you want to just very briefly ask your question before I move on to closing statements, please? You're on mute, although you're not on mute, but we can't hear you for some reason. No, we can't hear you, but we can hear you mouth. Can you hear me now? Oh, nearly there. Still nothing. Do you want to just type your question in the chat box and I'll read it out for you, please? That might be a bit easier. Sorry? Yeah, put it in the chat. That's great. Put it in the chat and I'll read it out, Nick. No problem at all. And then
I think she's telling you it's already is in the chat.
Oh right. I may have missed it. I can see thousands of.
Yeah, it's the last. Shall I read it out?
Yes, please. Yes, please, Ian.
Okay, so she says one way Brent can meet their goal of being carbon neutral by 2030 is if the schools and council catering go plant-based. Animal agriculture is a lead cause of climate change. Brent cut catering at council events. However, the mayoral election still is catered by Brent. Will you put pressure on the schools to reduce their dairy and meat consumption by going plant-based 2 days a week? And will you make the mayor's election catering plant-based? I know Anton is on board and supported me on this and was unfortunately one of the very few councillors to reply to me about this issue.
Wow, that's a very big question. So plant-based approach is the way forward to address a huge amount of this. Sunita, your comment on that?
I'm a vegetarian, I'm plant-based, so I'd love to encourage that through all the local primary schools, and yeah, I would love to push for
that. David?
Agreed. Simple as.
And Councillor Georgiou?
So as Ian said, I did support a call that was made and this idea being promoted by the council. I think that if we're going to be serious about doing some of these things, then we're going to need to elect councillors who actually respond to emails and actually get on board with these things and push the council to act. So I can pledge that Liberal Democrat councillors will be active councillors. They'll be around responding to queries, responding to emails, and hopefully getting this sort of agenda on the council's on the agenda for the council as well. I think that one of the places that we need to start thinking really, really carefully is what we're eating, how we're consuming, and how impactful that is for the environment. And where better to start than with young people? They're the future. They're the ones who are going to be eating for longer. So we should be getting that ingrained into their psyche quite quickly, and give that option to schools as well. So absolutely, but you need to elect councillors who will respond.
Thank you very much. Very briefly, Councillor Butt, we're running out of time, and I want to just
I think for me, I mean, if we just start on the food element, right? I think we throw away 6.5 million tons of food every year, right? So I think it's imperative that we have all those conversations, right? And encourage more people to reduce the amount of food that they buy and waste, right? And then take a look at how we encourage people to become more healthy, and if that means encouraging more people to become vegetarians or to take up plant-based diets, then that conversation is absolutely key and critical going forward.
Okay, thank you very much. We now reached I will ask Ian to once again, thank you very much for that, Nick. I appreciate it. We'll ask Nick to time this 3 minutes in reverse order this time, and then we'll have the quick poll that we started out at the beginning. So, David, first, your 3 minutes, please, just as part of the closing remarks. Don't feel the need to use the 3 minutes if you don't want to. Off you go.
Thank you. Just a quick thing to take to Councillor Butts when he talks about consultation when it comes to planning rules. Your party destroyed a green space near me with zero consultation with the council, with local residents. When we spoke to your fellow councillors in the area, such as Roxanne Mashari, she agreed that there was zero consultation, and said that she promised to get us a meeting down at GLA, down at County Hall, to talk about it. Guess what? Nothing has happened. Never heard anything, despite us chasing, despite us asking, nothing happened. That's why I'm here today, because there is zero accountability. But apart from that, I'd like to finish on a much happier note. I'd like to thank all the members of this cross-party panel, the audience, and of course to you, Hashi, and Brent Friends of the Earth for hosting this amazing event. It's been very insightful, a huge eye-opener for me personally. And speaking as the candidate for the Green Party, I fully support all of the FoE's pledges. I thank my fellow panelists also for their environmental work and commitments. And finally, I now feel much less alone in my fight to help protect Brent's green spaces, for which I thank you again.
Thank you very much. Councillor Georgiou.
So I think at every election, politicians say that this is the most important election of our lifetimes. And actually, I genuinely do believe that these local elections are going to be really, really important for our borough and for the environment. I think that the changes that the Labour Party are pursuing and have been pursuing for the last 12 years in our borough have had a detrimental impact on our local residents. As the Liberal Democrat councillor for Alperton, I can speak for Alperton residents and say that they are sick and tired of not being listened to, and for the policies that are being pursued are having, a negative impact on their lives. We need to see a much more ambitious agenda when it comes to the climate crisis. This isn't a joke. We are at a precipice, and if we don't follow through with some of this great talk that we've all heard today in these hustings, we're in 4 years' time, as I said previously, we're going to be in a much, much worse position. If you think that the pandemic was bad, the coming crisis, the coming emergency as a consequence of rising climate is going to be even worse. So as Liberal Democrats, we will pledge to be loud voices within the council chamber, continuing to call for rapid acceleration of retrofitting of buildings in the borough, pushing for more green jobs, promoting active travel, protecting our green spaces, divesting our borough's pension fund from fossil fuels, and engaging with our communities. That's the most important one, engaging with people and letting them know, empowering people to know that they individually can make a difference. So this is what Liberal Democrats will do if we're elected. I hope you'll consider lending us your vote on May the 5th. And I very much look forward to continuing this conversation going forward. Thanks for everyone for organising. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Georgiou. Councillor Butt, you have 3 minutes, please.
Thank you very much. And I just want to say thank you to all the panelists, and actually to everyone who took part in this and asked us all the challenging questions. Right, and for me, right, it's just about we as a Labour administration have delivered for Brent. We will continue to deliver for Brent. Right. We do need to make sure, right, that every single person, right, that needs our help, our support, is given that support, especially in their time of need, right. We're actually facing some of the most challenging issues around the cost of living crisis we're facing, the fuel crisis, the food poverty that we're seeing, right, and the measures and the support that we have put in is making a difference. And the one thing I think that people haven't spoken about, I think it's more about in relation to the social services that people are now even more dependent upon, right? And that's where some of the focus will need to be, some of the challenges and the issues around sort of the mental health issues that are emerging. And right, I think I do need to remind people about the unfolding events that we have around Ukraine, and how we need to make sure, right, that those people over there who are coming over, who want that refuge, are given that support. And Brent has always been one of those boroughs that welcomes and values the contributions that all our communities make, and by working together, by moving forward together, leaving no one behind. That's what we're looking to do for the people of Brent, and that's what a Labour Council will do.
Thank you very much. And Sunita, the final word goes to you.
Thank you. Regarding the 6 pledges, point 1, I think it's a great idea. However, this would have budget consequences, and the priorities would need to be given and established, especially for homes or businesses which have the highest loss of heat due to poor installation. The second pledge, the Conservative Party will look at ways of improving non-fossil fuel renewable energies such as heat pumps, solar power and wind power. This means creating green business opportunities here in Brent to make a contribution to lowering our carbon emissions. Point 3, safety is a priority, reducing fuel emission, national and local government working towards lowering carbon emission targets. And giving buses more priorities. Yes, this is something we can work towards and encourage people to use public transport in order to reduce carbon emissions and contribute towards the government and local authorities' carbon reduction targets. Point 4, totally agree. I've personally made a contribution to this already regarding green spaces. And point 5, engage with the local communities, take on board their concerns, encourage them to participate with projects that will help reduce global warming. And lastly, point 6, this is something I know little about. However, if I get elected, I will look into this and report back.
Thank you very much.
Because we all need to reduce our fossil dependencies and consumptions. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that honesty as well about what you may or may not know about. That's quite refreshing to hear. Now, final poll. Please, if I may ask Ian to bring and Elaine to bring up the poll for us before you
just going to do that now. I'm launching the poll now.
As a reminder, we saw that Labour was ahead at the beginning of this poll, followed by, I think, the Liberal Democrats, or sorry, I think it might be in the Greens. I've forgotten the order from before, but I do.
It was 35% Labour, 29% Green, 21% Lib Dem, 15% Conservative, and 9% were undecided.
Great. Let's see how, if at all, people's positions have shifted. Please vote now.
Okay, I think I've given everybody a chance to vote. So I will end the poll and I will share the results now.
Thank you very much. And I must say thank you to everyone. So we've seen that Labour's share has fallen from the 35% to 17%. The Conservatives have lost 1%, I think. The Liberal Democrats have gone ahead at 33%, just followed by the Greens at 31%, and the other has gone to 6%. So thank you very much to all the candidates. Thank you to Elaine and Ian for having me host this. I'm going to hand over back to you guys again for your final words. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. We're just about a couple of minutes over time, but I'm going to hand back to Ian and Elaine for the closing remarks.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Hashi. I think that was, I think we'll all agree that was a very useful, good debate, airing a lot of questions. We got in quite a lot of questions from members of the audience. If people would like to click on the 3 dots in the chat, they can save the chat for future reference. As I said earlier, this has been recorded. We will endeavour to put it up on our website in the next few days, and you will get a notification that that has gone there, so you can relive the whole thing again when we're not getting Netflix to put it on, but you can look at it or show it to or share it with your other contacts, people who haven't been able to attend tonight. And it's very good to hear from the candidates of their commitments to the pledges. And I think I'm going to hand over to Elaine to finish off now.
Well, I think you've said everything. Yeah, we'll be holding people to account with your pledges. So watch this space, and yeah, thanks very much, everybody, and have a good rest of your evening.
Thanks very much, guys.
Sorry, it may be that people can't save the chat. If you can't do that, we'll put the chat up on the website as well as a text file, so everybody can see it. Okay.
Thank you, everyone. Good night.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
Bye.